To order. Welcome to meeting number 31 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Science and Research. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Orders of June 23, 2022. Members are attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. Pursuant to Standing Order 108 and the motion adopted by the committee on Monday, September 26, 2022, we are continuing our study of citizen scientists. I would like to make a few comments on behalf of the witnesses and members. Interpretation for those on Zoom, you have the choice of at the bottom of your screen of either floor, English, or French. For those in the room, you can use the earpiece and select the desired channels. I remind that all comments should be addressed through the chair. And in accordance with our routine motion, I am informing the committee that all witnesses have completed their required connections tests in advance of the meeting. I will welcome our witnesses, and I will allow each of the witnesses to have a 5-minute opening statements. I will do my best to give you a notice when you're coming down to that last few seconds, and if you can try to keep it at 5 minutes, that helps us with the clock management. And with that, to our MPs here, we will be due to scheduling of House business at the end, we will be handling the clock a little tighter than usual so that we have that time to take care of the in-camera business that we have today. So with that, I will let our first opening statement for 5 minutes be started with Dr. Kerr.
Thank you very much. It's a true pleasure to be able to join you today in person, this time in the sacred spaces of Parliament and from the unceded territory of the Algonquin people. I'm sad that our friend, the Honourable Kirsty Duncan, is unable to be here today, and I wish her a speedy recovery. I'm Chair of Biology at the University of Ottawa, where I also hold a research chair. I'm past President of the Canadian Society for Ecology and Evolution, and am a long-standing member of NSERC Council. Like each of you, I care deeply about making a difference for others. I mostly try to do this through science. I've spent most of my research career working to understand how human activities affect biodiversity. Everyone here will know that we are in the midst of a human-induced mass extinction, the likes of which we have not seen since the end of the age of the dinosaurs. This time, our own activities are the cause. To solve this wicked problem, we require an all-hands-on-deck approach to understand how biodiversity is changing. In recognition of that imperative, a postdoc on my research team, Maxime Larrivée, and I created eButterfly at University of Ottawa 12 years ago and launched it simultaneously in French and English. But why butterflies? Because they are an indicator for how other species are doing, and because they are so beautiful that they can inspire the most cynical among us. eButterfly now uses artificial intelligence to help identify species from digital photos that anyone can take with a cell phone anywhere on Earth. But does such data make a difference? A few years ago, I set out to answer this question. Over the past 130 years, professional scientists collected 300,000 observations of 297 different butterfly species across Canada's vast landmass. Using eButterfly, citizen scientists doubled that number in 7 years. These volunteers found species in places overlooked by professional scientists and sometimes detected them at times of year that were either earlier or later than we had previously thought possible. But the real magic happens when you combine both citizen and professional science data. That approach provides a much more complete picture of how Canadian species are responding to human impacts. In other words, citizen science data transform our understanding of how global changes affect Canadian biodiversity. And now we know enough to take critical steps to protect species and their ecosystems. Such strategies figure prominently in the COP15 Montreal Agreement to conserve biodiversity, including to protect 30% of the world's surface by 2030 and to halt and reverse nature loss and species decline by 2050. But how will we test whether such policies are actually working? We must take a global all-hands-on-deck approach combining professional and citizen science and honoring the distinct ecological knowledge of the world's indigenous peoples. Big science needs big data, and citizen science helps us get that vital ingredient. Canada is already using such data to help monitor the state of its threatened species, including monarch butterflies, through eButterfly's Mission Monarch project. There's a great need to expand monitoring efforts to include other groups of species and to address other kinds of problems. But just as importantly, scientists must be willing to throw open the doors of their ivory towers to embrace more inclusive ways of measuring the world we all share. The rapid growth in citizen science programs around the world and in Canada suggests that more scientists are willing to do just that. But we must guard against repeating the mistakes of the past, which might cause scientists to work with an unrepresentative few in our diverse country. In the future, I hope citizen science programs will touch everyone's lives, supporting Indigenous communities in their own languages and helping inspire and include people who are underrepresented in our scientific organizations. I hope governments in Canada will ask how citizen science programs can help make the kinds of differences for others that motivated many of us to pursue our careers in science. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Now, moving on to Ms. Lewis for 5 minutes.
Good morning, and thank you to the committee for inviting me to speak with you today. My name is Nikki Lewis, and I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Kids Brain Health Network. Kids Brain Health is a Canadian national network that puts science to work for children with neurodisabilities and their families. These are lifelong conditions characterized by impairments in cognition, communication, behavior, and motor skills resulting from abnormal brain development. We support the development of cutting-edge research and the implementation, scale, and spread of evidence-based solutions. With funding from the federal government's Networks of Centres of Excellence programme and equally matched funding from many other partners, we have invested more than $77 million into over 200 projects and research initiatives so kids with disabilities and their families can live their best lives. Kids Brain Health's focus is directed upon proven solutions in early identification, early interventions and effective treatments, and family support. Today, I will speak to you about one of our programs, the Family Engagement in Research program, better known as the FAIR program. FAIR recognises parents and caregivers as equal partners in all phases of the research process, from research question design to data collection and analysis, and disseminating the findings into practice. FAIR is funded by Kids Brain Health and co-led by parent leaders and paediatric health service researchers at CanChild Centre for Child Disability Research at McMaster University. I would like to introduce in the audience Dr. Andrea Cross, Assistant Professor from CanChild, and Ms. Connie Putterman, a parent partner, who are two of the co-developers and co-leaders of the FAIR program. The FAIR program includes an evolving suite of training courses, knowledge mobilization and mentorship initiatives. It is led by citizen partners and researchers and is rooted in shared values of co-creation, collaboration, and respect for the different types of knowledge and experiences. The inaugural FAIR course is a fully accredited 10-week online course for both researchers, trainees, and family partners. To date, 300 graduates from 14 different countries have taken the course. Half of those are parents and caregivers. And many have advanced to become leaders across institutions and networks in neurodevelopmental disability, child health, mental health, and women's health research. We are currently in the process of adapting the course for youth and self-advocates with lived disability experience, frontline practitioners, and healthcare providers. We're also expanding the course to ensure availability to Francophone researchers and families. So far, 3 Francophone course instructors have been trained, and a French FAIR course will be launched this year. More recently, we launched an advanced 10-week online training course for FIR graduates called the FIR Leadership Academy, with the aim of being a springboard for future FIR leadership development in Canada. The FIR programme has become a nationally and internationally recognised forum for training and mentorship. The programme is creating a rising movement to embed best practices of citizen science into neurodevelopment and child health research, institutions and networks across Canada and abroad. But while the programme has grown through several partnerships, further investments are needed to sustain commercialisation nationally and internationally. Over the years, we have seen the positive contributions that equitable and inclusive training has on the research for kids with neurodevelopmental disabilities and their families. Kids Brain Health is proud to fund programmes like FIR that allow families and caregivers with real-life experiences to provide researchers with context they would otherwise not have, and therefore producing outcomes that are much more easier to implement and more likely to provide value for families. Canada has an opportunity to be a global thought leader in citizen engagement in the conduct of health research and implementation to the betterment of our children and future generations to come. Kids Brain Health has seen success with programmes that can be scaled and have the potential to be equally impactful in other areas of science and research. Federal programmes such as the Strategic Science Fund can play a vital role in unlocking and further enabling these kinds of partnerships. We stand ready to help this committee, the government and the scientific community in Canada with inclusive and equitable citizen engagement in research. Thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to your questions. Merci.
Thank you so much for that. Now on to Dr. Gonzalez for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for this invitation to speak to the committee today. I'm joining you from Montreal, which is situated on the traditional territory of the Kainai Kahaka, also known as the Mohawk Nation. I'm a professor and researcher at McGill University and founding director of the Quebec Centre for Biodiversity Science. The QCBS is a strategic research network composed of more than 100 researchers and 500 graduate students from 15 universities and colleges in Quebec. Over the last decade, the QCBS has fostered and supported citizen science projects in Quebec, Canada, and elsewhere around the world. Last December saw the historic agreement of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework of the UN Convention on Biological Diversity. This landmark plan with 4 goals and 23 targets is designed to avert the global biodiversity crisis. The text recognizes the essential knowledge contributed by Indigenous peoples, local communities, and citizen groups the world over. Without them, we know we will not reach these targets. I am not exaggerating when I say that the last decade has seen a transformation in the participation and contribution of citizens to biodiversity science, where citizens with different levels of expertise can engage in scientific projects. New technologies have been part of this story. For example, the social network iNaturalist, which allows citizens to take photos of organisms and share them with their phones, has recorded 9.7 million observations of nearly 35,000 species made by 171,000 Canadian citizens. This is a truly remarkable contribution. And indeed, this activity is filling large gaps in our knowledge of Canada's biodiversity. A report in 2010 by the federal, provincial, and territorial governments of Canada, called the Ecosystem Status and Trends Report of Canada, concluded the following: we lack long-term, standardized, spatially complete, and readily accessible monitoring information. And this is significantly hindering our capacity to assess the status and health of Canada's ecosystems. This quote is as relevant today as it was in 2010. Our task of monitoring biodiversity change in Canada cannot be achieved by government or researchers alone. Citizen science is vital. In response to this growth, the QCBS has invested in projects designed to initiate and support citizen science. We do this in collaboration with partners such as government ministries, conservation NGOs, and zoos. You can find the projects on the QCBS public portal called Kebio, but allow me to briefly describe a few of them. Alarming trends in bird, bat, and bee populations have been the focus of several successful citizen-led projects. The project Denis Chez Vous, or Nests at Home, encouraged more than 500 elementary school kids to install nest boxes in their backyard. and to monitor the presence of nesting birds via the project's website. When a bird box is occupied, scientists then track the health and success of the fledglings to understand the long-term fate of the bird populations. To date, these children have made more than 4,500 observations of 111 bird species. The scientific and educational value of a project like this is obviously remarkable. In the Pan-Canadian project Bat Watch, citizens have reported the presence of over 900 bat colonies in their attics, barns, or bat boxes, allowing scientists to track the impact of something called the white nose syndrome, a disease which is causing unprecedented mortality in hibernating bats in Canada. Citizens are also helping to digitize hundreds of thousands of plant specimens in herbarium collections, thanks to an online platform developed by the QCBS. This is providing precious historical reference data now in digital form to the research community. So Canadian citizens are also contributing internationally via applications like iNaturalist, eBird, or eButterfly, assisted by artificial intelligence and taxonomic experts to report observations of wild species in other countries. And this information is being shared globally. Citizen science also promotes science education. It allows participants to understand the wildlife and ecosystems that surround them. Citizens are becoming experts in their own right, in fact, able to further support the scientific activities in their communities. A recent study has shown that volunteers who participated in citizen science activities have elevated scores of well-being. So in summary, the participation of citizens in research is having a transformative effect on science and society at large. We recognize the remarkable contribution of citizen science to understanding and averting the biodiversity crisis. We are only just learning to promote this society-wide effort. We hope that this committee, Mr. Chair, will recognize these initiatives. The QCBS will be very happy to provide additional information and support to this task of this committee, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much with that. Now, moving on to the rounds of questioning, we have MP Mazur.
Oh, that was the second round. Okay. Mr. Kerr,
Who's doing the first round next?
Just 1 second here. Just clarify. Who is expecting to go in the first panel would be Gerald. So we'll call a little change there. Gerald, you have the floor for 6 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses today. I want to start off with Ms. Lewis because that's a unique program that's being offered, and I just want to define how citizen scientists are being used there as opposed to just research people that are being examined, I guess. What's the difference between the two?
So the parent partners who are part of the course, you know, when they graduate, we have sort of a matchmaking service where they can get involved in research programs that are of interest to them. So they're involved in the research right from the get-go, right from the very question that's asked. Is that a question that is relevant and will provide a solution that will have impact to our families and children? So that is their involvement in everything that KBHN does in terms of the research that we support. We follow what we call this co-produced pathway, where our families and researchers and partners all work together from the get-go. We will not fund research if it doesn't follow that model. It's a very important model, and the FUR training augments that because we are bringing in new families with the confidence and expertise and knowledge and skills to join more research programs in neurodevelopmental disability.
My follow-up question then, through the third program, you say that's in 14 different countries. Are you noticing any differences from country to country, or is it relatively all the same? And if there is differences, why do you think those differences are happening?
Thank you for the question. So of those 14 countries, we've had 2 cohorts that were part of our commercialisation efforts, one in the Netherlands at the University of Utrecht and the other in Australia through the University of Melbourne. And those cohorts have just happened in the last year. And there will be adaptations that are needed. So we're working with the investigators at those universities to modify them. The course that was offered at the University of Utrecht was translated all into Dutch. And so there will be tweaks, but overall the fundamental principles still apply. In fact, those fundamental principles can apply to other conditions, not just neurodevelopment. It's the model that's being followed.
Okay, but I was saying, have you got any data to see if there's any differences between children from Canada versus the Netherlands or something like that? Is there noticing any significant differences in neurological issues or not?
I think you're asking me a question there on prevalence of neurodevelopmental disabilities worldwide.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of similarities right across the world in terms of prevalence. I don't think that Canada is leading the way specifically in prevalence across many neurodevelopmental disabilities. We're seeing the same prevalence figures in Canada as we are seeing in the US, and as well as Europe.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Dr. Kerr, with your research and using citizen scientists, I know it's very important to have them out there, but what safeguards do you have in place to make sure that it's accurate information that's being collected?
That's a superb question. The accuracy of citizen science data is paramount, or it risks actually contaminating and hindering the scientific process, which of course would be the exact opposite from what we all intend. We have a number of different safeguards. One of the things that we do in our program, and this is replicated in many others, is that we ask citizen scientists to submit their observations in the form of a digital photograph, which is a very easy thing to do these days with cell phone technologies. And so that's one layer. And what happens is that when that photograph is submitted, we have a panel of experts, people who are the very best folks in the country for identifying butterflies, and they can look at that photograph and say, okay, this is what you think it is. And then we can do other things as well. We can say, okay, so you just said you saw a monarch butterfly, but it's January. I think you might be thinking of something else. So we can do little checks like this where we can evaluate the known flight seasons of different species and say, okay, this is when this butterfly is reasonably active and there's a little bit of error on either side of that time. Is it possible you could have seen this butterfly in this place at this time? So there's a number of different layers, and we don't use the unvalidated data for science purposes. So we only use the materials that have gone through a number of different independent quality checks. That's a really good question.
Okay, well, Dr. Kerr, that was kind of going to be my follow-up, but because I know we've had other scientists talk about how they've got extreme people one way or the other trying to manipulate the research, but you're saying if it's not validated, then we don't ever have to worry about inaccurate information then from your side.
You know, if somebody really wanted to cause true mischief, and they were an expert in an aspect of, in my case, biodiversity, it would be possible to cause mischief. But the fact of the matter is that I've never encountered somebody with such a level of expertise who actually wanted to cause harm. And the other thing is that, you know, if there's kind of an outlier observation that somebody, you know, very cleverly slipped into the system, other experts would be excited about this. And then they would go and check and fail to find that this could be supported. So the system has a lot of checks and balances. I wouldn't say we never have to worry about it in the broad realm of citizen science.
Thank you so much for that. We got to move on to our next member of Parliament. We have from the Liberals, MP Solsa.
Yeah. Thank you very much, all of you, for your presentations. Very enlightening, discouraging, but encouraging at the same time, given all the monitoring and engagement by citizen scientists. Ms. Lewis, you have a cheerleading squad with you, and it's great to see what I call warrior moms in my riding, people that are fighting to ensure that their kids are developed and have all the opportunities afforded to them, and they do extraordinary work. And I'm pleased by your presentation today, and I'm also encouraged by the network that's been established in what you do. And can you just share with the team here how these projects have enabled these young minds to grow and provide contributions that are unexpected?
Thank you for your question. I'd like to answer that by talking both about families, parents and trainees, because the programme is a matched programme. So we have equal number of parents and caregivers and equal numbers of typically junior scientists and trainees taking the programme. And they work together in this shared safe space to complete the course and the certification. And then when they become involved in the research themselves, the trainees have a new perspective on how to conduct science and the importance of the contributions that families, individuals and caregivers can give to the research. And the families themselves, then they feel like they are equal and respected members of a team.
So this is kind of a segue to my next question for both Mr. Kerr and Gonzalez. And that was, and I think, Andrew, you mentioned something about the lack of monitoring and information availability, and yet Mr. Kerr and the teams, so many good things are happening, and much is being reported. But can you elaborate what is lacking then in your mind, Mr. Gonzalez?
Yeah, thank you for this question. What we're talking about is a capacity within Canada to systematically assess the state of its ecosystems in a way that supports policy and action, conservation action in light of that policy, coast to coast and south to north. And the current situation is that although we do have many observations of nature, in the order of millions of observations, they tend to be located in a particular part of the country, essentially to the southern border, where many people obviously live in Canada. And so there is this geographic bias in where our information, our best information is. And that is not sufficient to assess how biodiversity across the country is changing. So this is where the combination or the collaboration between citizen scientists and researchers and government departments can come together to create a new collaboration, if you like, to endow the country with the biodiversity data we need to respond to the new biodiversity agreement.
That's it. Well, thank you for that. And Mr. Kerr, when we talk about the integrity, and you've already responded to an earlier question in respect to this, and I went through eButterfly. I went to look at your site, and it's great to see so many people engaged. And I take some sense of comfort that you see that not too many people are trying to manipulate it. But how then do we help Andrew in ensuring that there is integrity and that there is engagement, that more and more people are involved? And how do we encourage that to be so?
Oh, that's an excellent question. I think scientists have to be their own ambassadors and speak passionately and publicly about why curiosity about the world actually matters, but also make it clear that we want to try to reduce the expertise barriers for people to be part of that science process. And I think we see lots of examples where people are beginning to engage because they realize that you don't have to have a PhD to do something that really matters in the context of a scientific process. I think we need to discard our solitudes-based approach that is what has historically informed the way we think about these issues.
It's encouraging. I'm sure I'm out of time, but Nikki, we are not alone, as you can see. I think that's one of your mottos, so congratulations to all of you.
Thank you so much for that, keeping it within the time. Moving on to MP Plachette.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je salue les témoins.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to thank our witnesses for being here today. My first question is for Mr. Gonzalez from the Quebec Biodiversity Group. Mr. Gonzalez, first of all, I'm interested in knowing what language most of your activities take place in.
Ça dépend.
Well, it depends. The courses that I teach at McGill are in English, but as the co-director, I have an opportunity to speak French, and especially when we deal with the departments, the provincial departments, or any of our partners, NGOs, for example, in conservation, we speak French. Well, thank you. I'm happy to speak to you in French today in one of the two official languages of our country. A first question for you. You made some important remarks. You said that there's a lack of information. And you said that that leads to consequences with respect to the ability of looking at how ecosystems are developing and the state of our ecosystems and biodiversity. It's not just the role of the government. There's also an opportunity for collaboration with citizens to be involved. So I'd like to take a few minutes to look with you at what we can do there, how we can guide, if you will, or influence people, encourage people to get involved in citizen science projects, and then contribute to the development of science, traditional science and citizen science, generally speaking. Answer. Well, that's an excellent question. We are talking about a collective effort here. When it comes to biodiversity, to my mind, it's about creating a context, a network like the one we have that's unique, because we can make a link between citizen science and decision makers, between NGOs, businesses. So we play a role, if you will, as a catalyst. We bring people together because there has been confidence established in the network. We can meet the requirements and the needs of the departments or the ministries. We've shown that over the past 10 years. Then we can convert that into information. We can hold discussions with different citizens groups. So through, for example, this online platform that's open and public, we can stimulate citizen involvement, get them interested, first of all, at the government level, but also at the municipal level. We can percolate down. We can work through that structure. And this is what we saw with the Conference on Biodiversity. We need to be involved at the municipal level, but also at the national level. So what we're seeing is that we have an ability to change a situation because we can create those links. We can work on establishing those networks for the long term in various territories and in the case we're speaking about in Quebec. Well, thank you, Mr. Gonzalez, for sharing that information with us. I agree with you especially with respect to what you said about having citizen science and the impact it can have on society in general. It's been mentioned many times already today. Now, what I'm trying to illustrate here today with respect to citizen science is mobilization of knowledge, for example, for a part of the community. And I'm referring to language, to the French language, which is almost absent or is not very present at all in some aspects of science, in some sciences, in fact. So I'll share some comments that I didn't invent from a professor who said that there is an inequality when it comes to access to knowledge and science in French. So here's my question. How can we have a concrete impact on people in science if science is in one language that isn't accessible to a segment of the population? How can we do citizen science if there's a deficit when it comes to access? A scientific deficit. Now, you work in both official languages here in Canada. How do we resolve that challenge, that mystery, if you will, that seems, if not insurmountable, but very difficult? Well, it is insurmountable. It is not insurmountable, rather. I'm convinced that we can take action and accomplish it. Now, we are active at the university and college levels. This is in the Quebec educational system. We have a network of researchers. They are bilingual. The websites that I mentioned in my remarks, Chauve-souris aux abris, Nests at Home, Bats at Home, they're French language platforms. You can click and change language. The children who participate, some 500 children, school-age children, are interactive and in French, and that. Sorry, I'll stop.
Moving on
Monsieur
to
le Président,
MP
je vais me permettre,
Cannings.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I'd like to ask Mr. Gonzalez to provide some additional information in writing if he could. I would appreciate if he would agree to put together the rest of the information he wanted to share with us on that topic. Yes, I'd be more than pleased to do so. Thank you.
On to MP Cannings.
Thank you. Thank you to all the witnesses here today. I think I'll just, I think this is such an important topic, and we have some really very informed witnesses, and I think I'd just like to ask Dr. Gonzalez and Dr. Kerr a question about citizen science in the environmental, ecological realm, how important it is, how, that long time series, vast geography that we face in Canada. My question is really simple. How can the federal government promote this? This seems to be such a dramatic shift in the amount of data we're getting, the amount of data we need to affect policy. How can the federal government best support citizen science? Is it funding coordinators from NGOs? Is it, having scientists on staff that go out and promote this? I'm just wondering, how can we best take advantage of citizen science facing the biodiversity crisis that we are?
Please feel free to start, Jeremy. Yeah, go for it.
Understood. I think there are a number of different mechanisms to consider here. First of all, of course, Canada enjoys its tri-council-based approach to research funding, and it would be straightforward to adopt a tri-council-based initiative that facilitated the expansion and use of citizen science programs for public outreach to inspire Canadians and to contribute to policy insights. I think that's one mechanism. But I think another mechanism is perhaps more of an Ottawa insider's view, and that is that the public service has extraordinary internal capacity, but does not routinely rely externally on sources like citizen science, with some important exceptions. And I think there are mechanisms both federally and in the provinces that we could encourage the public services of these governments to adopt that would facilitate their engagement with the broader knowledge-based community around the use and deployment of citizen science programs for various purposes.
Hi. Happy to add a little bit on that. Actually, I am concerned currently by the situation that Canada is blessed with an extraordinary level of expertise and engagement, expertise in the research community, in the citizen community, among our Indigenous peoples. We have invested heavily in our programs for sampling certain elements of our biological diversity. But what we have not done is stitch those efforts together. So what I'm trying to promote and what I would like us to think about moving forward is, can we create a Canada-wide, multi-language, multi-perspective biodiversity observation network? So this is sort of upscaling the QCBS model where we get engagement coast to coast, but it's working with local communities through this networked approach. And I think this is not an insurmountable problem. I think we have to work in the 21st century in this network fashion across a territory of this size. So I'm calling this the Canada Biodiversity Observation Network. There will be something like the meteorological service that we have and we rely upon every day. But imagine that as an analog to understanding the state and fate of our biological diversity.
Well, thank you. And I'd like to go back to Dr. Kerr now, and just, you mentioned how we would need to have immense amounts of data to, for instance, test whether the land we protect, land and waters we protect under 30 by 30 is doing the right thing. Are we actually using citizen science to choose those areas in the first place?
Certainly, there is excellent availability of information on these topics that the public service is making use of. And I mentioned our project Mission Monarch, which is informing recovery efforts for monarch butterflies in Canada. There are ways in which we can begin to use modern conservation science techniques for decision-making about how to prioritize areas for conservation. But the only way that that's going to work effectively is by pulling in data sources of all kinds. because as Dr. Gonzalez has quite rightly pointed out, there is far too much Canada for the amount of data that we actually have, which means that some of what we must do will be inferential using things like remote sensing in the context of a broader and integrated biodiversity observation network. But the tools to inform that process were part of the Target 1 initiative and figure prominently in decision making. It's our job as scientists to ensure that they remain present throughout that process.
Thank you so much, Mr. Canning. And moving on to the next round, we have MP Mazur for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the witnesses for coming out here today. I represent rural Canadians, and they know a lot about the natural environment and land stewardship. Unfortunately, the government doesn't always listen and doesn't reach out to these people when developing policy. So what role do farmers, ranchers, and landowners have in conservation and environmental policy? And I'll start with Mr. Kerr.
Thank you very much. It's an excellent question. I talked in my remarks a little bit about the need to be inclusive, and I meant that very specifically to be everybody. Communities that are not typically part of decision-making processes ought to be, because that's how we are supposed to do things in Canada. My experience in working with rural communities and with landowners outside of our cities is that every single one of those people cares about stewardship. I've never met a producer who wanted to degrade the capacity of the environment to continue to provide a means of living for their families into the future. I think we have to approach those communities with great respect and listen carefully to what they feel the priorities are around stewardship and weave that into our broader narrative. Those voices deserve respect, and I'm encouraged by the policies that I'm seeing being developed that will do exactly that.
Mr. Gonzalez, you have anything to offer? Add?
Yeah, indeed. It's an incredibly important problem. What we're finding on two levels of answer. First is that rural communities and landowners working far from the city often have an extremely deep appreciation and understanding of their biological diversity. And because of the types of technologies that Jeremy and I have spoken about today, they have never been more connected or better engaged in this sharing process, the sharing of observations and information. So that accessibility translates into an easier engagement when, through conservation projects and practices, for example, we want to establish new protected areas under the new 2030 goals far from the city. So through the QCBS, we've been involved in several projects that have involved landowners far from the city, far from Quebec or Montreal, in thinking about how to preserve the connectivity of our landscape. So I think I worry less about their role than might have done 10 years ago. We're seeing an uptick in this broad engagement.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Lewis, I think you can agree, when conducting brain research, I think most Canadians would agree as well, that it's important to listen to the professionals, whether that be doctors, scientists, and in this case, the citizens that are working in your project. But how do we ensure that decisions that are being made from research produced by certified professionals are not the opinions of politicians?
Well, I think that's the role of knowledge mobilization and knowledge translation is, and I think that's where the peer review process comes in, in terms of the sharing of the results of science and the acceptance of that high academic standard of the research that's conducted. I know with Kids Brain Health, we have a very, we look at research that's leading edge in this country around neurodevelopmental disability and how can that go forward. And we don't work with, or we don't support research that hasn't gone through a very rigorous process and has evidence and proof of principle before our organisation works with a programme. Because what we're interested in is implementation, is how can you have impact. And we know the statistic that it takes 17 years for an initial research programme to get to impact. We would like to see that sped up. And so we work with scientists who say, we've got something here. We've got a solution to a problem that's been identified. Can you help us get this to scale and spread? Working with our parents and families. And that's what we're about. We're about enabling excellent science to make it into the community.
How much time do I got there? Anybody else have an opinion on that? As far as having, how do we make sure that science prevails at the end of the day and not political opinion?
Very quickly, science is a kind of a self-checking process, and as long as it's conducted openly, it's very hard to conceal mistakes. So I think that it is its own mechanism for self-correction, and while it continues to be open, there is an opportunity to make adjustments to ensure that we're using science, not purely subjective views in making decisions.
Thank you so much with that. Now moving on to Madam Diab.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and welcome to all our witnesses. Just listening to you, I see the passion and the excitement in how you describe citizen science and how you describe that making a difference for others is what you said through science. So it's wonderful to see that, and it's been a great study. We've learned quite a bit about how everybody can be involved in one aspect or another. I know there's been a number of questions on reliability, integrity, engagement. So it's great to have received all these answers. I'm going to ask Ms. Lewis, because we haven't had many witnesses, to be quite frank with you, on health and health care, and particularly in that field in health research. And it is something that I'm personally interested in, but again, we haven't had many testimony in that. Can you talk to us a little bit more about the opportunities that citizen scientists, again, you talked about mothers in this case, what can, a bit more about that in health research for citizen scientists. I would love to get a little bit more for our study on that.
I think there's a tremendous opportunity to embrace citizen scientists in all of the work that comes through, that's supported by the federal government, that's supported by NGOs like ourselves. I think if the Tri-Councils put in a requirement around citizen engagement, like they are doing now towards EDI and other areas, I think that would go a long way to support the work that is being done. I think when I've been talking about the family engagement in research, it's a model. And the model is not just training. The model is around support, around advancement of leaders in family engagement, the advancement of those champions, and mentorship. Training, it's not enough to have training, and we've learnt that along the way over the last 5 years. We have seen, with the programs, the research programs that we funded, and I talked about over 200 programs of research, every one of those programs has family engagement and partnership engagement, and they've really helped shape the best research that we possibly can.
So you're talking about brain research, and in Halifax, where I come from, I represent a rich community in Halifax that has the Brain Repair Center at Dalhousie University, and I know they're doing magnificent work. Is there collaboration? Is there, do you share, or are you even aware of it, I guess?
We are aware of it. We're aware of all the brain research centres across the country. KBHN is a very large network, and it wouldn't surprise me if there are multidisciplinary researchers out of that institute that are involved as collaborators in many of our projects, because they're multidisciplinary and they're across Canada. So whilst the PI may be located at McGill, for example, at Montreal, the team is not solely located there. It's comprised of researchers from right across the country. So through that, we encourage the work that we do and do lots of sharing. We have a very large network and a very large mechanism for social media.
So that's fantastic to hear. And I know they are engaging quite a bit early learning, early researchers, but also undergraduate students, graduate students. So what role can they have to play in the work that you're doing?
Well, I hope they would apply to come and join the Family Engagement Research Programme, to get certified, to go through the course. It's a commitment. It's 30 hours of time, but online, and it would give them tremendous insight and knowledge and skills to then apply those lessons to the work that they do. The Family Engagement and Research Programme is open to any researcher or trainee who works in neuroscience to apply for the programme. And it's free of charge. KBHN has supported all our family members and our trainees so far to take the course.
So I'm just going to end by saying I have one of my children who is a neuroscientist. He's PhD and he's working in that field. So for me, this has been a tremendous opportunity to have you here and ask you that, because I think it's a phenomenal area that we need to do a lot more in. So thank you.
Thank you. Going on to our 2.5-minute round, we'll have MP Blanchette.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much. I'd like to continue with my questions for Mr. Gonzalez. Now, I took a quick look at your website at Quebec Biodiversity, and it's very, very interesting. I see that there are many publications. I've looked at them. There are 182 in total. Approximately how many of the publications are in French?
Je ne sais pas, en fait.
I don't know, in fact. I'd say that most of the publications in science, in biology, in and of itself, are in English. They're done in English. It's the lingua franca of science, of course, but I'd say that if I had to make an estimate, between 1% and 5%. I'll give you an exact answer. It's 1%. 2 publications of 190 are in French. So I asked the question in order to try to understand another issue, another problem. How can you mobilize the spread of knowledge for people interested in citizen science if there's no scientific content that they could be interested in that could encourage them to get involved? If it's not available in their first language. Now, I understand that it's the lingua franca we're talking about, but there's another aspect here. There are differences between English and French in Quebec and internationally, and so there is a deficit when it comes to mobilization in Francophone communities, I'm sure. Is it not inequality or an obstacle to scientific development for Francophones then? Well, I'd say that there are several obstacles when it comes to the spread of scientific knowledge. Most of these articles are behind a paywall. So in order to get access to the information, you need to pay. Researchers pay, universities pay to have access to information in scientific reviews and journals. So that's the first obstacle when it comes to access to scientific information, regardless of the language that it's written in. Secondly, there are obstacles linked to the need to clearly communicate the scientific work. Now, I strive to communicate in the media, on the radio, for example, in the press, in newspapers, on TV, looking at science in terms of its ability to mobilize and
If I apologize for cutting you off, but if you have more, you can always submit in a written form your answer.
Will do.
Now, going on to the final
fault.
2.5 minutes, we have MP Cannings.
Well, thank you. And I'll kind of follow up on that because I was going to ask a question about how important, well, how beneficial citizen science is, not just to the scientists and the science data and information we gather, but to the citizen scientists themselves, you know, the benefits they get, the feeling of inclusion, their ownership of the data. Mr. Mazier was talking about farmers and rural people with that deep knowledge. Citizen science projects could give them that sense that they were doing something, that they were part of it, they could understand it, they would see the results. And I just wanted to maybe talk about that. And I would just add, following up from Mr. Blanchet-Joncat, that you know, most of these citizen scientists are not reading the scientific papers that come out of this. They're reading the reports that come out in the brochures and newsletters. I come from the Birds Canada world, where that is all in both languages, and that's where they get that sort of feedback, as well as on the sites themselves. But if you could just maybe spend a very short period of time, because I've talked a lot, about how important it is to engage those citizen sciences and report back on their results, and so they can feel that they truly are part of that whole scheme. Sorry for Jeremy and Andrew. Yeah.
Perhaps I'll lead things off then, Dr. Gonzalez. You know, the citizen scientists, you know, they deserve, they've earned the respect of the professional science community because their expertise is profound. So in addition to giving them the sense that we actually honor their contributions, you know, they actually, you know, they are sometimes the most knowledgeable people about what's going on in their communities, about the species that are present, about identifying those characteristics of biodiversity that are distinct in those places. There are so many ways in which we can communicate that outstanding kind of contribution. I speak to school kids. I've done some national presentations to classrooms, simulcast all over the place. Children are deeply excited about the fact that they can be scientists too, and they can. They just have to care enough, and they have to know that we care to accept what they contribute. The same thing is true in a more adult kind of way in every community with which I have interacted over many years now. My sense is citizen science is a two-way street. It's a kind of conversation between the professional science community and the broader
I'm
Canadian
sorry, I'm going to have to
landscape.
cut you off. We are out of time there, and I
Sorry.
encourage you to also submit a brief afterwards as well on this subject. So with that, a big thank you to all our witnesses today. We will now be suspended briefly before moving on to our next panel. We are now moving into our second panel. And up first, with opening statements for 5 minutes, we have Dr. Haji Bai. I'm not sure if that's close, but welcome to the committee.
Thank you so much. Mr. Chairman and respected MPs, members of the Science and Technology Committee, thank you for providing this opportunity to speak about the important topic of citizen science. I speak here as the scientific lead of a highly collaborative project called the STREAM, that stands for Sequencing the Rivers for Environmental Assessment and Monitoring. This project was launched in 2019 and is deeply rooted in over 20 years of research and development in Canada and internationally. My academic base is at the University of Guelph, where I'm a professor of molecular biodiversity, and I'm also the chief scientific officer of the Center for Biodiversity Genomics, which has led the world in the application of DNA-based tools for biodiversity discovery. This week, we celebrated the 20-year anniversary of the introduction of DNA barcoding and the Barcode of Life program. DNA barcoding uses species-specific regions of the genome for distinguishing a species. Under our guidance, the scientific community has now sequenced over 10 million specimens from about 400,000 species, providing a powerful biological database for species identification in a range of settings, from food safety and security to species conservation. We have also pioneered the bulk identification of a species in biological communities in aquatic ecosystems using a technique known as environmental DNA metabarcoding, which uses high-throughput sequencing platforms. This approach is transforming biodiversity monitoring in support of water quality assessments. Given its large land area and significant remoteness, Canada represents a major challenge for river biomonitoring. Climate change and various development projects pose more challenges for timely and effective biomonitoring programs. Current tools are not accurate and scalable. Over 15 years ago, I started collaborating with scientists from Environment Canada and Parks Canada on utilizing our DNA-based biodiversity tools for addressing a chronic lack of biomonitoring data. However, I soon realized that a major bottleneck that we are facing is related to generating samples from rivers across Canada on a timely basis. Together with collaborators from Environment Canada, WWF Canada, and Living Lakes Canada, whose representatives are here today, we launched the STREAM in 2019 with funding from a competition from Genome Canada. We developed a modular program where community groups, including several Indigenous communities, become partners in the STREAM. To ensure effective engagement of community members, we developed a standard training module by taking advantage of the CABIN framework. All our citizen scientists are certified for gathering samples and various site metadata using a standard operating procedure. We have engaged over 100 individuals from many communities, and they have collectively gathered over 1,400 samples from watersheds across Canada. Our objective has been to generate biodiversity reports for community groups in less than 2 months. We have generated over 70 reports thus far, and have also established an online knowledge portal with various tools for visualizing and reporting data. Because the STREAM samples are collected by local communities, our program continued even during the pandemic. After the completion of our Genome Canada funding, STREAM is now partially supported by a grant from Environment Canada and also philanthropic funding from the Illumina Foundation, an American genomics company. Given the importance of generating knowledge to sustain Canadian freshwater ecosystem, we are hoping to build a more sustainable funding model for STREAM and expand the approach for other taxonomic groups such as fish, vertebrates, as well as hosts and vectors of infectious agents such as emerging zoonotic viruses. I'll be happy to address any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now on to our second presenter on the second panel, and we'll have Ms. Hartwig for 5 minutes.
Good morning. My name is Kat Hartwig. I'm the Executive Director and co-founder of Living Lakes Canada. I've worked in the NGO environmental sector for 33 years, focusing the last 2 decades on citizen science water stewardship and community-based water monitoring. I'm honored to be speaking to you today from Briscoe, BC, the traditional territory of the Ktunaxa and the Sitapwik nations. Living Lakes Canada recognizes Indigenous people as the rightful caretakers of their unceded territories. Joining us today are my colleagues Reagan Mallison and Georgia Peck, managers of our biomonitoring and lake monitoring programs. In 2022, the Canadian Climate Institute issued a report stating that by 2025, over 90% climate impacts and disasters will involve water. This will slow down Canada's economic growth by $25 billion annually. It is clear that the climate crisis is a water crisis and must be solved collectively, for which governments at all levels and all scales play a critical role. However, it will require many more hands on deck to address a challenge that should have begun 30 years ago. Through community-based water monitoring, our governments can mobilize and build upon the passions of thousands of citizens who have deeply vested interests in maintaining watershed health, water security, and thus food security. We also need to be able to manage adaptively in response to the unforeseeable climate-driven changes in the water cycle. Living Lakes Canada is a national award-winning charitable organization. Our science-based programs range from groundwater, lake, stream, and wetland monitoring to lake foreshore health assessments, biomonitoring for restoration, and a national lake blitz. For hydrometrics, we monitor flow for fish, fire suppression, and apply a water balance approach to facilitate future water budget needs. We build open source data hubs, which are data repositories for water monitoring groups and are interoperable with federal and provincial databases such as Cabin. Data transparency and accessibility provide the foundation for data democratization. In 2018, Living Lakes Canada co-convened a national roundtable for Indigenous and non-Indigenous community-based water monitoring leaders, including policy experts from ECCC and CERNAC. We developed 60 recommendations for the federal government, which can be found in the supporting documents, both in French and English. And the overarching themes were: first, capacity building, build on existing community monitoring efforts, support youth programming and cross-sectoral partnerships. Second, efficient and effective monitoring, ensure data monitoring standards and protocols are universal, transparent, and built on best practices. Third, data management, scale up open data management efforts, both within and outside of government. And finally, regional and national collaboration, increase efficiencies and build synergies versus silos. Water governance in Canada is complex and can have multi-jurisdictional gridlocks. Community groups offer untapped local capacity and can play a unifying role in ensuring that the health of freshwater will help meet Canada's Water Act mandates while advancing whole-of-government priorities. In closing, my strongest suggestion is that the federal government, with all due respect, catch up. We are well beyond proof of concept on this topic. Support the growing momentum around Indigenous and non-Indigenous community-based water monitoring, regardless of the vehicle you choose to use, be it a sleek Canadian water agency or otherwise. Whatever mechanics, it needs to be nimble, have low barriers for citizen entry, build upon existing best practices and initiatives, and most importantly, ensure high quality control for outputs. Water monitoring to address climate impacts takes time and money, neither of which we have the luxury of wasting. Thank you to the organizers for this opportunity today, and thank you to the Standing Committee for all of the work that you do for all of us.
Thank you so much for that. Now moving on to our final opening statements from Mr. Stewart. I believe you're on mute right now.
Sorry, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Carl Stewart, and thank you very much for this invitation. I farm wheat, canola, soybeans, and peas in Manitoba. I'm also director for the Western Canadian Wheat Growers Association. We represent grassroots wheat farmers. Our goal is to promote policies that strengthen the sector, help Canada be a world leader in wheat production, and ultimately benefit consumers with healthy and affordable food staples. I have a great deal of thought on this invitation. As farmers, we deal every day in science, the science of soil preservation, crop management, fertilizer. We care deeply about science and technology because those help us become better farmers and deliver higher quality and better yields. We have always worked closely with Agriculture Canada, a department that was in the business of leveraging science to make Canadian agriculture safe, healthy, and productive. More on that later. Now, good science doesn't just come from scientists and research labs or universities. Good science also comes from the citizens who practice it. Doctors, for example, are scientists in as far as they apply learnings in a constantly evolving and experimental setting with their patients to see what works best. But we are worried that science is taking a backseat to ideology. I'll give you an example. The current federal government says it wants farmers to reduce fertilizer use to help it meet commitments to greenhouse gas reduction. The trouble is, there is no science that backs up that policy position. It's simple. With less fertilizer, we will grow less wheat. World demand for wheat will not decline, so less Canadian wheat will be produced and more will be produced overseas by countries whose farmers use far more fertilizer than Canadian farmers. It's called carbon leakage. Cutting our fertilizer use will cause more fertilizer-based CO2. It's a simple calculus, but it's not being applied by our government. Recently, we learned that Agriculture Canada, which used to be committed to using science to help Canadian farmers grow more crops, has now changed its mandate to mitigating and adapting to climate change. That scares farmers because now Ag Canada cares less about what grows in the Palliser Triangle and more about the Paris Accords. As far as citizen science, well, there may be a role for it, but we worry that citizen science can easily be captured by the dominant ideology of the day. Instead, we would advocate, as far as agriculture is concerned, that we leave the science to scientists and practitioners. The greatest benefit to consumers will come from scientists and practitioners working together to increase food supply, to keep it safe, healthy, and affordable. Let's keep the ideology of the food supply. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Now moving on to our 6 minutes of questioning. First up for the Conservatives is Mr. Mazur.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Stewart, citizen science involves listening to citizens when developing policy. You mentioned the government's fertilizer policy. Did the Liberal government consult with the Western Canadian wheat growers before introducing their fertilizer reduction policy?
They did not.
Not at all?
Not at all, unfortunately.
Wow. I assume you know many farmers across Canada. Are you aware of any farmers that were consulted on the government's fertilizer policy before it was announced?
Unfortunately, once again, I do not.
If farmers are expected to meet the Liberals' fertilizer reduction targets, what would be the impact to Canadian food production?
So I'll reference a report that Myers Norris Penny did for Fertilizer Canada. The report's titled Implications of a Total Emissions Reduction Target on Fertilizer. So then this is based on a 20%, not a 30% reduction. But so then yields, of course, will go down through time as soil reserves of nutrients get depleted. So then if if the implementation were to start in 2023, out to 2030, Myers Norris Penny predicts that a loss at 23.6 bushels an acre of canola, 67.9 bushels an acre of corn, and 36.16 bushels of wheat per acre. That would all essentially be lost. That would have to be made up elsewhere.
So there would be less food produced in Canada, correct?
Correct. So less food, so supply goes down, demand goes up, costs go up substantially. Canada is a large exporter of these crops, and so then world markets would see a considerable disruption.
And how will the government's fertilizer plan affect income of family farms?
So the short answer is, significantly negatively. The problem with farming is all the money is in the last few bushels an acre. The first easily 2/3, and of course these numbers change from year to year depending on input prices and crop prices. But the first 60, 70, 80% go straight to creditors. You got to pay for equipment loans, you have to pay for crop inputs. It's those last few bushels an acre that go straight into the farmer's bank accounts. So a reduction in yields and fertilizer, it would be disastrous. Yeah.
And it would also it would make you less competitive with our other exporters as well. You maybe, if you want to explain that a little bit as well. Like, how does this put us on the world stage as far as a farmer competing with the rest of the world?
Well, so Canada's also, like, it's already one of the highest cost producers of agricultural commodities there is. We're furthest from the destination markets. There's lots of red tape. My family actually got started farming in 1980 when interest rates were high. And the only way that the farm managed to be where it is today is everybody worked like dogs for a long period of time and made a bunch of sacrifices. It's not an easy industry. And if you were to take all the capital involved with farming and compared it to annualized stock returns, let's just say in any particular index, it's not even close. The index outperforms farm gate returns any day of the week. Sorry, can you repeat the question? Sorry, I lost
That's okay.
track
I
there.
have more questions for you. You did good there. You answered it. Yesterday, the agriculture minister stated, and I quote, "We are working with farmers for farmers." Do you agree with her statement?
I strongly do not. We feel like we've been left out. In your previous questions there, we haven't had any consultation at all. If you're actually for farmers, you would think the bare courtesy would be to do at least some consultation to see what the effects are. We feel that we haven't been fairly represented in Ottawa for quite some time here, and it seems to be getting worse, not better.
So it's clear that the government isn't listening to farmers. So what's your message do you have to the politicians who are pushing forward with the fertilizer reduction policy?
I'd say our biggest concern out of all of this is just the complete lack of due process. There was no scientific no scientific data produced to support this, no consultation with practitioners, and ultimately there won't be any net benefit to the world. Canada's nitrogen use efficiency is 72%, which is higher than the global average. Western European countries, for example, have a nitrogen use efficiency of 61%. Limiting our productivity will lead to higher production in countries with a worse environmental track record than Canadian farmers. Canadian farmers have been implementing the 4R fertilizer stewardship and best management practices for over 15 years now, with over 6 million acres verified, and this is all without government intervention. This policy is disastrously uneconomical, unenvironmental, and unscientific.
Thank you. That's all I have, Chair.
Thank you so much. Now moving on to MP Collins for 6 minutes.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And if you don't mind, I'll get us back to the citizen science study that we're doing. After that last exchange, I actually feel compelled to ask about scientific literacy and how we're using and relying on NGOs and organizations across the country and their army of volunteers to help us with misinformation and disinformation as it relates to science. Maybe I can start with Ms. Hartwig. After that last exchange, I just started to think about some of the things that I heard at the door going through the election in terms of people questioning vaccines and the effectiveness of vaccines and questioning science, really. And I think most of us around this table would agree that it was science that got us through the pandemic. And science will get us through and help us combat climate change, I think, to your point. And so if I could, through you, Mr. Chair, ask Ms. Hartwig, her comments as it relates to how citizen science will help us combat some misinformation and disinformation that we hear as it relates to our climate crisis, and it is a crisis, and how will science and citizen science help the government make informed decision on policy matters related to the same?
Okay, thanks for the question. It's pretty loaded. I mean, our area of expertise is to empower citizens to do water monitoring and to do community-based water monitoring, driven by and for community when communities have questions and concerns about water and water security, and in particular water that supplies food security, water to food security. So the way that we combat that is For example, where I live in the East Kootenays, we've had the challenge of climate change deniers not really believing that we were going to be impacted. And lo and behold, though, we have lakes that are drying up. We have severe drought conditions and we have flooding. And so Mother Nature is presenting what's going to happen, whether we like it or not. And so I feel that one of the ways that we can combat misinformation is by simply doing the work that needs to be done, collecting the data with rigorous scientific protocol and solving problems collectively. I don't think there's an opportunity for us to be pointing fingers at each other. We're all in this together. We all have children. We all need food. We all need water. And so that may sound idealistic, but I think we need to keep our eye on the ball.
Thanks, Ms. Hartwig. Professor Haji-Babeh, can I ask you the same question in terms of, science is more important today, I think, than ever before, and it's progress that we've made in the scientific area over the last 20 or 30 years, again, that helps us get through the pandemic. Of course, we've seen that, the whole questioning of science has come up from a political perspective, that we certainly see that almost every day that we're here in Ottawa. And we experience that obviously on social media, and we see it in the news even today on a growing basis. And so I guess I would ask you the same in terms of the work that you're doing, the biodiversity monitoring, what we're doing to trying to address and combat our climate crisis. How important is it for you and the citizen scientists that you work with to ensure that from an education perspective, that the citizens that are participating and the information that flows to the general public is seen as something worth value?
Yeah, it's definitely is a very important topic, and I'm glad that you brought it up, because I think the education is sort of the key thing that we need to work on, and the earlier we start, I think that the better it will be in terms of the long-term impact. And I think I give you a couple of examples of the work that we have been doing. A few years ago, I visited, I'm a bench scientist. I'm more working in the lab and the computer, but I get to go to field and see some of the sites. And a few years ago, I had the chance of visiting some of the sites that's used for oil and gas extraction around the Cold Lake area in Alberta. And I saw that basically there are kind of large patches of the forest being sort of cleared to put, facilities and pipelines and so on. And then we were involved with sort of coming in and finding ways to restore the forest to its natural state. And I, just like, when you do surgeries, like nowadays, rather than doing these large invasive surgeries, we can do very small kind of incisions and are more accurate. I think, imagine if the engineers or people who were involved, workers involved in this, were able to, they knew the importance of biodiversity and the difficulty of bringing back these forests into kind of natural state. They would be probably thinking about methods and approaches that can be less harmful to the environment. So even though they are not experts in this field, but collectively having the knowledge and understanding of, for example, the importance of environment. So I throw in a keyword that we've been thinking about, and which is bioliteracy. And I think that in general, so everything biological, from medical and life sciences to environmental and biodiversity related issues, I think bioliteracy and citizen science programs are some of the best ones, because people, either school kids or indigenous communities or workers in an oil company, they all believe that they're part of this scientific enterprise of gathering information, and that will allow them to go in and learn what is the information going to be used for. How are the scientists in Environment Canada or NGOs like Living Lakes are going to use this information? And that's going to create this bioliteracy layer that we're all looking for. And I think nowadays, put the checks and balance in place, we can actually utilize this information. It's educational, but it's also scientifically very useful for us, and probably for some issues, the only way to go forward.
Thanks, Professor. One last question, Mr. Chair. I know I'm running out of time. If I could ask Ms. Hartwig, we went many years without investments in science, and in fact, I don't think science was seen in the past as being of much value to government, prior to our government taking office. And what I would ask you is that, you talked about playing catch-up, and building capacity. What do you think the government needs to do in terms of making sure that science is important and we're making key investments in the citizen science area?
And we're out of time, so you're going to have to submit it in a brief afterwards. We're very interested in your response. And with that, we are now moving on to the next 6-minute round with MP Blanchette.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Et je me...
Thank you very much, and I'd like to thank the witnesses for being with us here today. Science likes facts. So do scientists, and I'm sure that parliamentarians as well. I can't ignore the fact or the situation mentioned a little earlier, saying that things have been caught up when it comes to science, and I'd like to rectify the comments. Canada is the only G7 that has reduced its investments in research and development over the past 20 years. To the best of my knowledge, though there have been many different governments over the past few years that led this country. So I think that some people around this table and, in fact, the witness would be able to draw some conclusions from that. Now, I'd like to continue on the subject of the day, Mr. Chair. And I have some questions from a question for people from Living Lakes. I think that this is an important issue, and people understand that I agree with citizen science. I think it's very important, as Mr. Quirion, the head scientist from Quebec, who appeared before the committee recently. Citizen science can be used to combat and fight disinformation, misinformation among the general population. I'd like to hear the people from Living Lakes, Canada, as scientists on the ground, as to how we can have more of a positive impact.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I'm not sure I completely understood the question. I'm going to reiterate it, and you can tell me if I'm correct or not, but it sounded to me as though you were asking how we can dispel myths and provide more truth around citizen science or around science in general.
Merci beaucoup. Écoutez, je vais reformuler plus simplement.
Well, I'll reformulate. I had quite the preamble there to my question. So what are the advantages of using citizen science then? And I'd like to add to the first question that will lead to a second. What can we do? What can the government do to help you with projects led by citizen scientists?
Okay, thank you for reiterating the question. And I'm going to give the question also to my colleague, Reagan Mellison. But first, I want to say that citizen science has access to sectors that the government may not normally have access to. And so through social media, we are able to access young people and make science interesting and sexy and want people to participate. And so that's a venue that perhaps is less available to the government. And so I'll pass this on to Reagan, who directs our biomonitoring. And then I'll come back to your second question in terms of what the government can do. And I think, actually, I might just answer that now. I think what the government can do is help us build partnerships. And we have 60 recommendations that we did provide to the government. But I think that if we can have less silos and have more cooperations and build exciting programs together, which we already have with the University of Guelph, for example, with Mirdad and with the WWF, there's really amazing and innovative partnerships. For example, we are partnered with the Alpine Club of Canada and for our high elevation monitoring. So we get skiers and snowboarders and alpinists helping collect data. So to make it fun and interesting and not as daunting for young people, we have to inspire hope. And with that, I'll pass it to Reagan. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much for that question. So what citizen science can do and what advantages it provides includes, as Mirdad was mentioning, that multidisciplinary partnerships. And those are really key to everyone serving and operating out of their strengths, whether it be the citizens or the communities in their local or Indigenous knowledge. And then the researchers in that data analysis, interpretation, large-scale projects. Multidisciplinary projects are very important. It provides huge cost savings instead of government having to travel to remote sites to provide reference sites. We've been working with communities to provide that information right in their backyard. It also provides, again, remote data that we other speakers have spoken to, and this is really important for water data. And scientific literacy, it builds trust in the institutions because there's opportunities for communication and understanding. So thank you for that question.
Merci beaucoup.
Well, thank you very much. I'd like to go back to the importance of citizen science. In 2019, G7 scientists produced a statement, a common statement on citizen state science with respect to the Internet. And it was a prelude to Biarritz in France. As part of the declaration, there were several recommendations, including one to create funding programs for a citizen science. Now, we know that there are some initiatives that exist in Quebec. Mr. Quirion, Rémi Quirion, the chief scientist, talked about some engagement programs and commitments. But we must realize that there are a few steps that were taken by the federal government in order to increase visibility of certain projects or to even set up some projects, financial support projects. I'd like to hear your comments on that. Is it important to have financial funding support from the government in order to generate citizen science projects and initiatives?
Who is the question directed to?
À tous les membres de votre organisme qui sera apte.
To all the members of the organization, anyone who can answer it.
Okay, I'll start, if you don't mind. Just to say that yes, we need support from the government. I think that Canada is a laggard in that department. We fund projects for specific species at risk and things like that. But what we don't do is make normal community-based water monitoring or citizen science. We work with Global Nature Fund in Germany, and we're connected to Living Lakes International. And it's astounding the comparisons between the EU and Canada in terms of the money that's allocated for community-based water monitoring, both Indigenous and non-Indigenous led. And so, for example, in the Columbia Basin, to collect the water data in order to allow our communities to have adaptation.
I apologize.
Options.
We are 45 seconds over already,
Monsieur
and we're not even getting through it. But if I would ask yourself and the other panelists if they can write a written brief to explain your answer to that question, that would be much appreciated. Moving on to the last spot in the 6-minute round, we have MP Cannings.
Well, thank you, and thank you to the witnesses for being here. I'm really struck in this panel by the whole concept of collaboration, and just especially hearing from Living Lakes and Stream. You know, all the partners that you mentioned, whether it's Environment Canada, Parks Canada, Guelph University, the Cabin program, you know, all these other citizen science programs that are feeding in. And I know Living Lakes has a whole suite of those projects from across the country. So I guess I'll start with Ms. Hartwig. It's always good to talk to somebody speaking from the Kootenays. And if you can just maybe elaborate on that concept of collaboration. It's something you mentioned in your recommendations, and how we can foster it, how the federal government can help you with that collaboration process. And I'll just let you take that away.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Mr. Cannings, and thank you for helping to organize this session. I think it's very important, and collaborations are everything. I mean, we are in an era of a climate crisis. We can't be working in our silos. We must reach across and do multi-sector collaborations. It depends on the project. So, for example, as I was saying earlier, the High Elevation Monitoring Program, we've collaborated with unlikely people who are now becoming water literate. So the Alpine Club of Canada and high elevation lodge managers. We know that we're past peak flow in the Columbia Basin, which means that we have diminishing returns in our water supply from glacial melt, which means that our recharge rates are changing, and it means that snowpack is changing, and all of these urgent things that people now understanding in these partnerships. We partner with Teck, the coal mine, in terms of looking at some of the water quality issues in the Elk Valley. We partner with Indigenous partners. And I'll maybe defer to Georgia, who hasn't had a chance to speak about some of the partnerships she's developed through the foreshore management project that she's doing.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Kat, and thank you, Mr. Canning, for your question. Through the Foreshore Integrated Management Planning Project, which was originally created by Fisheries and Oceans Canada in the early 2000s, we have developed some pretty exemplary partnerships with Indigenous communities across British Columbia to help move this project process forward in the most inclusive way possible. We have recently co-created a local Indigenous knowledge and values framework with the Upper Nicola Band, located in Okanagan, BC, to ensure inclusivity throughout the project. As Kat mentioned, climate change is a global issue and one that we cannot tackle alone. Collaborations and partnerships have never been more important than they are today. And as you mentioned, the Kootenays are an amazing example of how those partnerships and collaborations can propel movements forward.
Well, thank you. And I'd like to quickly turn to Dr. Hadjibabai to talk more about the biological end. I'm very curious. I know, and again, more collaboration. Things I've reported on iNaturalist have ended up getting barcoded by your people, and so I'm just wondering, in stream, what's the breadth of the biodiversity that you monitor through that barcoding?
Basically, I think the collaboration is key, and in my opening remarks, I tried to sort of describe the process. Over 20 years of R&D and going from grants to grants. And we've been very privileged. In Canada, we have programs like Genome Canada and various programs in Environment and Climate Change Canada that kind of funded us. Like in 2017, sort of my job in the academic sector is to kind of do the science, develop the technology, and then basically see how it's going to be disseminated. And WWF Canada came to us with their plans for the watershed reports, and that sort of started a new line of collaboration with Living Lakes and all the groups that they collaborate with, and the Indigenous communities and various community groups. So I think from that standpoint, I think it would be impossible to gather this much data from a vast sort of geographic area in especially for us in Canada without this type of collaborations. And I think from the standpoint of information that we are gathering, we are now with this the tools that we have and the data that is generated through the samples that that our partners providing, we are actually getting tens and maybe more than 10 times more data. Focusing on macroinvertebrates currently because they are the bioindicators. But now, as I mentioned, we are moving very quickly. We have plans now with the PHAC and the CFIA and to use the same type of community-based monitoring to tackle some of the emerging zoonotic viruses and vectors and their hosts through this environmental sampling. So I think this is just the beginning. And I think that this type of programs will definitely play an important role for the future of monitoring programs in Canada and also internationally.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to our witnesses and for our MPs for insightful questions today. We do have some in-camera committee business to take care of, so we will conclude this portion of the committee. And once again, I'd like to thank the witnesses, and now we stand suspended briefly in order to move into in-camera.
Thank you.